Welcome to the History of Retina's Leaders and Legends series. The purpose of these interviews is to capture first-hand stories from individuals with unique retinal insight of historical significance. Through these discussions, we hope to provide a fuller understanding of the evolution of both the science and practice of retina through the lens of those individuals who have actually lived it. Today, it is my distinct pleasure to be joined by Dr. Eugene de Juan, Jr., who is the Jean Kelly Stock Distinguished Professor at University of California, San Francisco, and the founder of Foresight Labs. He completed his ophthalmology and vitreoretinal training at world-class institutions, including Johns Hopkins University's Wilmer Eye Institute and Duke University. He later channeled his medical expertise into his passion for innovation, leading to his many, many discoveries, including what we know today as the transconjunctival approach to 25-gauge vitrectomy. In 2005, Dr. de Juan established Foresight Labs, a serial ophthalmic company incubator that has helped develop 12 companies to date. He is the inventor or co-inventor of nearly 100 products and holds nearly 450 U.S. patents or patents pending. He also served as the president of the American Society of Retina Specialists and has received numerous awards, including the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Academy of Ophthalmology and the prestigious Pyron Award from the ASRS. When we talk about pivotal innovators in our field, Dr. de Juan's name is always one that comes to mind. But we know that the road to greatness is often winding and colorful. And I'm just delighted to welcome Dr. de Juan, who will share his unique journey in his own words. Gene, I've got to confess as we start this conversation, it's a bit daunting to be covering your illustrious career. You've done so incredibly much. So maybe it's easiest if we start at the beginning. You were born in Washington, D.C., but you really grew up in Mobile, Alabama. And I know your father, who played a very influential role in your life, was also an ophthalmologist. Tell us about your childhood. What was the young Gene de Juan Jr. like? And did your father really set the seed, sort of plant the seed in your mind for ophthalmology that was obviously coming along in your future?
For sure. My father was, kind of a very dominant type of figure. My mother was beautiful and a wonderful mother and great cook, but my father was the real head of the household. I would go with Dad to the hospital, and the nurses would say, "Oh, you're going to be a doctor like your dad." Or very early on, I said, "Yeah, I thought it was good." But as I got older, I wanted to distinguish myself from him because he was dominant. So it kind of changed that view. It's not about love, just about me being me. It's been a problem my whole life.
I don't know if it's a problem at all, Gene. I mean, I think it's interesting because a lot of times you are who you are, even at a very, very young age. And I feel like that was also the case with me too. And I think if someone were to describe you now, decades later, you're still someone who marches to the beat of his own drum and sort of pushes the envelope. And I think that's a great thing. And I think it's very foretelling for all the amazing things that would come down, later in the line. So you grow up in Alabama, you finish high school, and you go on to college. You become a chem major at Emory. Tell us what your time there was like.
Well, Emory was as far north as I'd kind of ever been, and it was wonderful. New place, very exciting, and fun. And I had good grades, and I was in the advanced classes. But the real thing was, I met this beautiful woman, and kind of my priorities changed like 180, and the classes were much less important than, getting her attention. And I kind of failed at getting her attention for a long time. So those classes suffered. But anyway, eventually it kind of cycled back and got her attention and got finished with a chemistry degree.
right after you finished Emory. Did you go straight to med school after that?
No, I had a year of poor grades, and poor grades for medical school. I applied to University of Alabama in Birmingham in biochemistry, and I got accepted, and I decided to do that because it seemed a little more modern, 50 years ago. and spent 2 years in a PhD program at UAB. And only after 2 years, really, when I only had about a year left of my PhD program, I got into the University of South Alabama and I decided to go. And so that was an absolutely wonderful time for me because I have a deep interest in science, and it just was one of those, throw you into a situation that you just really loved, and I did. Lots of freedom, lots of new things, and so that was wonderful. And I do think it helped me, in medical school and later, and just thinking about things. Everything was curious, everything was science, everything was learning, and so I really enjoyed that part.
Gene, in medical school, I remember feeling pulled in a lot of different directions. I'd always known I was going to be a doctor, always knew that I was passionate about medicine. But once I got there, I sort of found a lot of different specialties appealing. I liked cardiac surgery and psychiatry. Were you the same way, or were you just very laser focused on ophthalmology?
No, I really, I almost knew I didn't want to be an ophthalmologist. Again, my father, that was just, I wasn't going to do that. I'm a junior. Okay, I'm a doctor, but I'm not going to be an ophthalmologist because they think I did it just because. And so, of course, I was exactly the same. I loved every course I was in, and that passion came through and over and over. But we didn't have a department of ophthalmology. So, in a very funny way, I became an expert in ophthalmology without ever having any, only having your father an ophthalmologist. It was a genuine crisis, and eventually I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And a lot of humility, having to learn. But then it was, okay, where do you go? There were several places. Baylor was one. It was interviewing. And basically, I got in, and I remember being at Wilmer, and I got a second interview at Wilmer, and they said, I said, I can go to Baylor. I remember Dr. Momini saying, well, you should go there. I thought, okay, fine, I'll go to Baylor. I'm very happy. And then I got another call and came back again, and another interview. And Dr. Momini, I remember saying, he asked me, did I want to be a chairman? And I never thought, I just wanted to be an ophthalmologist. I didn't know a chairman of ophthalmology. And so I said, sure. And, a little bit of that mentality, of course, is doing something, being willing to take the leap in that moment, and that's how I got to Wilmer.
What was your time there like?
Very quickly, I always knew I wanted to do retina, and so even though I liked everything and I thought everything was important, I was going to do retina, and I was going to go back to Mobile and practice with my dad and be a retina doctor.
You're off to Duke for your fellowship training. Tell us about your time there in terms of mentorship. What was it like training under, for example, Dr. Mockemer?
We were like kids in a candy store. This was, for us, really one of the most exciting places, new stuff happening. Mockemer was a larger-than-life figure, especially to me. And after 3 months being there, he asked me to stay on faculty. And it was that event that kind of disrupted this path back to Mobile.
Tell us about the those early years in your career, those where you're building your reputation and kind of really putting the flag into the ground. What were those years like?
I wanted to have a impact, and we were all in that kind of mindset. And Mockimer established, we had the biophysics lab, we had an instrument designer, Dyson Higginbotham, and he could make stuff, and so lots of things came out. I mean, we were operating on, for example, ROPIs. We had terrible retinal detachments. These are the kind of can be mostly impossible. We didn't know they were impossible. We were trying. Everything was kind of impossible, and so we needed smaller instruments. And the story about iris retractors. Iris retractors were built for infants. They had to be little flexible things because metal ones, you couldn't put it in the infant eye. It was that kind of 25 gauge instruments, not transconjunctival, but very small instruments were also, we started playing with them there. And so it was, constant gas infusion, all kinds of laser. I mean, just on and on and on every day. We were taking them from the lab to the OR.
So obviously you're very productive during this beginning part of your career. And 9 years goes by, and Wilmer picks up the phone and gives you a call and says, "Gene, we want you back." And they offer you the Joseph E. Green Professor of Ophthalmology. Tell us what drove that transition.
Robert Mockimer, he had developed the field, and there are lots of stories about Robert. So when the opportunity came to go to Wilmer with basically Peter Campachero and Julia Howler, these were friends and colleagues. It was a real opportunity, and I wanted to try to expand this development activity from a guy, really talented guy, to engineers. And I wanted to bring the engineers to the OR, let them see what we're doing, let them solve the problems. And it was extremely productive, way more productive than I thought. And people gravitated to it because, a lot of, we know science is complicated, right? We take a long time and we do a lot. But as a surgeon, we immediately see the problems, or a lot of us, see these problems. And the engineers, of course, they love to solve problems, and if they see it, they can solve it. And so we had sometimes we would have 10 or 15 people working on different aspects of vitreoretinal surgery and other things too. And they told me at the time that it was the most productive lab at Johns Hopkins, which was
amazing.
It was amazing.
Yeah. So, Gene, you're doing great things at Wilmer. You've clearly formed a lot of fantastic collaborative relationships. And then you get an somewhat unexpected invitation to step into the role as CEO of this newly formed Doheny Retina Institute. Tell us about the thought process when you're considering an invitation like that. And obviously you took it. What was it like to run an institution like DRI, and especially one that was brand new like that?
Well, it was, again, a thought for me. And the thought was, I want to do development. We had done a lot of licensing deals, kind of getting royalties, but that takes a long time. What if we could actually start companies inside of the university? We don't have to take kind of personal ownership. The institution can take the ownership, but we can benefit, financially if it's successful. It was, I think, very successful. We went from 20 to 100 people by the end. But this idea of focusing on impact as opposed to focusing on academic productivity, not writing papers, not doing grants, not even seeing how many patients you were seeing, but how much did you change the quality of life in a broad sense, Well, after 4 years, I had run out of the assumption that we could do that. I ran out of time. And people actually in a university have to write papers and have to get grants and have to.
That's why we still do it today, isn't it, Gene?
I couldn't change the paradigm.
So, Gene, 4 years later, 2005, you become the Gene Kelly Stock Distinguished Professor at UCSF. And you've been there since. You've been there working on your innovations. You've been there teaching the next generation of ophthalmologists, and perhaps most importantly, caring for our patients. It's amazing. But 2005 was a pretty important year for you, and there were two specific events that happened that year that I want to sort of hone in on. The first is that you began your term as president of the American Society of Retina Specialists, the ASRS. And the second one is that you founded Foresight Labs. I want to talk about ASRS first. So you've been able to watch the ASRS evolve into its present day form, which must be so intriguing to witness that really rapid growth. What drew you to become involved with the ASRS in the first place?
The ASRS, I know this because it was my first year out of fellowship, in fellowship really, in 83. Was established. And Reese Landers, who was at Duke, was a founding member, and he had it up on his wall. And Mockimer didn't want another society. He thought we should just build on the Retina Society, but the Retina Society was an honorary society. You had to apply, and you had to have papers, and you had to get in and get recommendations. But the Vitreous Society at that time was more open. And I said, as a young faculty member, about a year later, there's nothing I'm going to teach anybody in the Retina Society. They don't need me. I'm there learning, but I do think that the rest of the field, I know things that I could help them. So that's where I need to be. I need to be there. And okay, I have this idea of going there, and I know what we're going to do. We're going to have courses. So the first course at the ASRS was with me and 25 gauge. And then I started, along with Kirk Packo and others, started pushing the idea that we were a professional society. We weren't a club. So that pushed the name change. No senator or congressman or anybody's going to know what the Vitreous Society is. So we had to change it to an American Society of Retina Specialists. We didn't want to make it surgeons, even though we were primarily surgeons. We wanted to say specialist, and so that they would, that it would fulfill the kind of the political goals, the recognition goals that we needed. By the time I was president, all of those battles had been completed.
During your presidency, you witnessed perhaps what some would argue, one of the most historic events in our field, a very big turning point, and that, of course, was the first presentation of Lucentis and its effect. What was it like witnessing such a monumental moment?
So it was really the pinch myself moment in my career of watching a presentation where people said that the vision after choroidal neovascularization was improved, 3 lines or what, how many letters, 12, 15 letters. And I didn't think it was possible. I literally didn't think it was possible.
That must have been just so astonishing. I can only imagine like an audible gasp in the audience when that was announced.
It was really wonderful. And right after that, Phil Rosenfeld gave a presentation, and I think it was 2 patients, with Avastin injected into the eye. And why is there a guy talking about 2 patients where this other one had hundreds and hundreds of patients? And I thought, well, so. And then later, and I think this was a big mistake that Genentech had made. They didn't allow compassionate use of Lucentis. And so we knew it was like a miracle drug. And there may have been, and there was this possibility that Avastin worked as well. So everybody who had somebody that they really wanted to treat, they started using Avastin. And you treat one after one day, and you know that it's working. You needed a clinical trial.
Let's fast forward to Foresight Labs. I want to hear a little bit about this. What was it like getting started in the midst of Silicon Valley? You're surrounded by entrepreneurs who are just as enthusiastic, just as hungry as you were. Did you encounter any challenges?
I had a mentor, Bill Link, who he told me, if you want to develop stuff, you should go to the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and he said, and I'll help you. He was a venture capitalist. He invested early on in the first company. I looked at different models of how to do it. The model that I liked, or the model that I was most excited about, was the Foundry, which was a very famous incubator in Menlo Park. And they said, okay, I could work with them. And we had their investors, and we've started now 10 plus companies out of Foresight. And it started with those guys. I mean, it was, and it's been very, very successful, but it's those people that knew how to do it, the money, the venture capitalists, the engineers.
Gene, you've been the inventor or co-inventor of nearly 100 different products, including some major breakthroughs, Argus 2 retinal prosthesis, of course, the 25-gauge transconjunctival sutureless sclerotomy system that most of us use every single day. What are one or two inventions or innovations that you're most proud of?
All of those are great ones, so I really am proud of that. And I mean, thinking of what I'm really proud of, I mean, the inventions, all of them. I mean, I want to solve glaucoma. I want to solve AMD. I want to solve, drug delivery. I want to make blind people see. Now I want to make deaf people hear. Accommodating. I care about these big problems. And then the other thing is, I really care about infecting people with the idea that they can do it too, and helping them. And if I really had to say what I care about most, or what I'm most proud about, is this: the people that I've trained, people not even trained, people that I've been with, that I'd like to say I infected them with this idea, and they can do it, and they see they can do it, and they can participate, but then they learn, and then they do it independently.
I want to shift our conversation a little bit and ask you about teaching, something that you're clearly, passionate about. You've not only trained dozens and dozens of trainees during your career, but you also established the Eugene de Juan, MD, Professor of Ophthalmic Education Chair at the Wilmer Eye Institute in honor of your father.
I was so honored to be the son of my father, who was a generous teacher with his time. Other than your parents, your teachers shape your life. And such a generous thing. I also love the idea of, in my mind, thinking my third grade teacher had a big effect on me. I'd stolen two quarters, or no, actually, I think it was 2 nickels, which was a lot of money back then, to buy ice cream off her desk. And she said, I made a mistake. I left some money on the desk, and I shouldn't have done that. But if you found it, please take it back. And I did. I took it back. But the idea was she allowed me to self-correct. And so my father was a he spent a lot of his time in Mobile, going to the county hospital and supporting young residents that had come over from New Orleans and helping them with eye cases. And he did it, without pay and, took his time. But it's something that struck me as a very good thing to do. And so when I had the opportunity, because the first company I started out of Johns Hopkins, and that was successful, and I had some money that I could give back, and we established that chair, and it's been really satisfying to me.
Well, before we wrap up, we have this segment. We call it Quick Questions with Christina. These are 5 rapid-fire questions, Gene. You have less than 30 seconds for your responses here, so I hope you're ready.
Okay.
All right, Gene, let's go with question number 1. Greatest discovery in retina?
I think Lucentis in my life, that was the one that I see as the most impactful.
Person or mentor who's most significantly shaped your career?
I'd have to say Robert Markham, because he changed my mind about what I was going to do with my life. And literally didn't think that I would have the life that I have now if he hadn't said, I want you to be my partner here at Duke.
Career accomplishment that's given you the greatest sense of satisfaction?
We talked about it. It's all the people I've trained. Absolutely. Completely. I've done a lot of things. I've really done a lot of things, but I didn't do it alone. And those, as much as I've been able to encourage and have fun, and that was for sure it.
Favorite thing to do outside of work?
Sail. I love sailing. I don't do it very much. I don't do it enough, but I really like sailing. If I go sailing, I cannot add 2 numbers together. One and one, I can't figure it out. My brain just goes someplace else. And I love that feeling of not being able to think of anything.
Last one. Describe yourself in 1 word.
Okay, 2.
Okay. We'll make an exception for you.
Passion. I'm passionate. And it's not afraid, bold, willing to take that step.
Thanks for playing. Gene, one of the reasons I think so many of us love our field so much is because there's this constant quest to never be stagnant. What excites you most about the future of our field?
I do see a time that the major causes of blindness are going to be handled, whether it's a gene therapy for AMD or a totally protective therapy for glaucoma or myopia or refractive error or dry eye or accommodating lenses, or I think all of those things are in ophthalmology going to be taken care of. Unfortunately, not in my lifetime. I don't think. I really want to see those things, and I'm working on it. But I'm very excited about all of them.
Well, Gene, I have to say it's been an incredible pleasure and honor to speak with you. Thank you for all of the tremendous contributions you've made to our field thus far. We look forward to many, many more. And we really appreciate you being part of ASRS History of Retina Leaders and Legends in this series.
Thank you, Christina. It's been fun.